Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Amy, and I am one of the SSI Science Communication interns this summer. This is our 5th episode of our Live with the SSI Interns livestream series, where we get to interview members of our SSI intern cohort. To provide you a little bit of background about our overall program, we're part of SSI, or the Summer Systematics Institute, run out of the California Academy of Sciences, and we are a research experienced undergrad funded by the National Science Foundation. With the exception of myself and Tala, who is my co-producer and co-host, all of our peers are working directly with Cal Academy curators or PIs or members of their labs to do summer research, which is super exciting. So we have a preset list of questions that we ask all of our interns, but please do feel free to leave questions or comments in the chat and we will get to them as the discussion unfolds. Without further ado, super excited to be introducing our next guest, which is going to be Arlene. So Arlene, if you'd like to unmute and just share a little bit about yourself, including your hometown, pronouns, your home institution, and anything else you would like the audience to know.
Well, thank you, Amy. So hi, everyone. I'm Arlene. My pronouns are she, her. I am from Los Angeles, specifically the San Fernando Valley, but I currently go to school at Cal Poly Humboldt. So I've been living in Humboldt for about 2 years. And this summer, I'm going to be working with Dr. Raina Bell, or I am working with Dr. Raina Bell.
Awesome. I love that we're sort of both SoCal people that have then moved up north for college. So super exciting that it was similar geographical history. But our very first question is just a super easy softball question. How would you explain your summer research project to a 5th grader?
So this summer, I am working with African tree frog specimens that are part of the herpetology collection here at Cal Academy. Herpetology meaning like the study of amphibians, reptiles, amphibians being animals like frogs, caecilians, and then reptiles being like lizards, snakes. And so a good amount of the tree frogs here in the collection are unidentified to the species level, which means we don't know what type of tree frog they are. So this happens because when you're out in the field, tree frogs can look very similar to each other. So different species, different types can look very similar, even though they have like little morphological or little physical appearance, like little traits that can make them, you can help you tell them apart when you're in the field. It makes it kind of hard to do that. So my job this summer is to try to identify what type of frogs, like who are they, through DNA sequencing, which is basically, we have these letters that make up a code. And so each species of tree frogs have their own code. So my goal is to see, okay, if this is a green tree frog, it's going to match a green tree frog code. And so once I find the code of the frog that I'm working with, and it identifies to like, okay, is this a spur tree frog? Then I'll know, okay, so this could be a spur tree frog because the DNA code matches. But now let's confirm it with the way that they look. So I'll get a specimen or a tree frog that we already know what species they are. So they're a spur tree frog. And I'll compare it to my hopefully spur tree frog that we identified. And if they both look the same, so spur tree frogs have this little spike on their heel. So if my tree frog that I just looked at has that spur, so we know the DNA confirms it, and so does the way that they look, then I'll know, okay, hey, this is a spur tree frog. So we can identify their species that way. And this is important because knowing what type of tree frog are in certain areas or where they were found, where they were collected, we'll know, okay, this tree frog is found there. We can know like what their distribution is, like are they found all over Africa? Are they found in just Cameroon? And this creates like a reference for other researchers who want to jump off of that and do more research. And also just like a little history of the species throughout time.
Yeah, that's awesome. The class that got me back into biology was herpetology. So I always love talking about herps with people, and I absolutely love frogs. And I can confirm that, when you're doing a lab practical, which is just a lab exam, and you're working with specimens, which are these like animals that have been collected and then are preserved, it can be really, really hard to tell them apart, like just physically looking at them. And so the fact that like you get to sort of combine both DNA analysis and also morphometrics, or what the specimen looks like, to try to find, commonalities is really, really cool. Because it's also, like frogs or other herps, just like any other animal or plant on this earth, there's a lot of like personal or individual variation. And so finding those like physical qualities that can help you ID a species is super important for researchers, and also, really important for anybody who just wants to be more connected to nature and go out herping and like flipping logs and finding their own little tree frogs, although I don't know if we have them in California, but any frog that you find in your backyard. So our next question is just, what did you think research was before entering this internship or having any other type of research experience at your home institution?
So before starting college, I would say I thought research was like what I knew about research was from nature documentaries, and it was all field work. So I was like, okay, how does that translate to getting results or to getting a conclusion? I didn't know. I just thought you're going to go out there and collect data. But then once I started college, I realized that research has a lot of writing in it. You're writing why you're doing what you're doing, what's the problem that you're trying to figure out. You're writing your methods because you want it to be replicable, or want someone to be able to replicate it. And you also want to connect it to the bigger picture. Like, why did you do this research? Like, did you do it just to get information? Do we do it to apply it to other like management that needs to happen? And then I also learned that research is very underfunded. So you need to be a good writer and communicate in order to get money, because you want people to care about what you do and to share that passion and to make it accessible. But you also need to know how to communicate your research in order to get money, in order to continue doing your research, especially if it's really important, since you want to learn more about our nature and our environment. And then through this internship, I've learned a lot more about lab work. I didn't have the opportunity to do lab work until now. And so I learned that I really like it, which is a part of research that I didn't really think I'd be able to get into. So I was really nervous coming in, but now that I am able to get into it and feel really confident in it, and I'm really excited to see if maybe my future leads to that, doing more lab work.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know you and some of the other interns have been really grinding away in the CCG lab doing your DNA analysis. So it's awesome. It's like amazing to know that yourself and potentially other interns who've been with us this summer like had absolutely no lab background and are now completely like loose and like you're doing everything totally on your own, fully independent, which is absolutely awesome because I think DNA sequencing for me always felt like something that was super complex and like I was like, I have no idea how to do this. Seems really crazy. And I also love that you touched upon all of these other skills that I think people don't typically think about when they think of, somebody who's a scientist, like having to have good writing skills and have to find ways to frame your research to make it relevant to the general public, but also relevant to people who could potentially fund your work. So that was a really, really great insight that I think anybody in the audience who doesn't come from a science background, I think would appreciate knowing. But yeah, I mean, I think with that sort of now that you have through your experiences gotten to learn a lot more about all of the different facets of being a scientist, do you feel like you're a scientist? And like, if so, like, what does that mean for you?
Okay, this is a very interesting question. I would say, so I think I would start with what being a scientist means to me, or what I think a scientist is. And I think a scientist is someone who asks why. We'll see something that they don't know and be like, why is that happening? And then we figured out, okay, actually no one knows why yet. So let's try to test, let's create a hypothesis, use a scientific method, try to figure out that why. And then uses that knowledge and applies it to conservation or for management, or just so we know. It's important to know things sometimes. A scientist is also someone who is able to communicate their science and make it accessible, and also communicate, or I mean, not communicate, I would share or be a mentor to someone else and be able to make science really interesting, while also trying, in order to bring more people in, because I think diversity in science is also very important. So being able to make this a really safe community and welcoming community is really important, a part of being a scientist, because you want more scientists. You want to bring in the next generation and make it really exciting. So basically a scientist is someone who can answer why, test it, and then who is able to communicate what they know. I would say I feel like I'm a scientist because I feel like I want to be like, I'm answering why. The only hesitation with being a scientist is I don't have a degree yet. So I feel like in order to be a scientist, you might need a degree, which wasn't in my definition of a scientist. But for me personally, I was like, maybe I need a degree before I just say I'm a scientist. But I also feel like I've become a resource for people to ask questions, whether it be my peers or people who are earlier along in their college career. And I'm happy to help and happy to tell them what I do know and what I'm doing, and try to get them excited about coming into the field and making it a safe space. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Not that my word has much credence, but I think you're absolutely a scientist. And I think it's wonderful that you really emphasize this like mentorship aspect of science. Because as you know, like in our program, we've had a lot of ongoing conversations about what it means to have a mentor or to be a mentor. And like absolutely I agree that, you know, we need more diverse perspectives and individuals in science that have, and a lot of them have historically been excluded. So I think opening yourself up as a resource and as a mentor and having that be like a very explicit part of how you identify and how you want to do your science moving forward is just something that's really wonderful. And it actually sort of leads really perfectly to my next question, which is just how do you feel your personal identity informs your science?
This is a big question. So when I think of my personal identity, I think of three things, which would be being Mexican American or Chicana, being a woman, and then also being a first generation college student. I feel like these three things or having these three things in the beginning of my college career or just joining STEM was very scary because I did unfortunately find myself in spaces that weren't necessarily welcoming or safe, which is I feel like becoming less of a problem, but still very relevant and still something that unfortunately we people who look like me face or other people in other groups that have been excluded also face still, which is not to put a downer on things, but just it does suck sometimes. But I think also throughout my college career, I've also been really grateful to meet mentors and professors who really pushed to have conversations that people don't necessarily want to have and making these safe spaces for us to talk about those things and have the opportunity for me to reflect on myself and be like, instead of trying to hide away these things that make me who I am, instead be proud of it. And to realize, okay, I'm a direct representation or reflection of the people who've got me here, those mentors, my parents who are immigrant parents who worked really hard and didn't have the opportunity to be a scientist, and I do. So I'm really grateful for that. So it really pushes me to work hard in what I do in my science and makes me really passionate about it. But I'm also like a direct representation of people who look like me, or just for someone to see like, hey, she can do it, I can do it. And I was like, yes, you can do it. And I think that's something that really drives me, motivates me, because research can be very stressful sometimes. School can be very stressful. And, you know, there's times where like, what am I doing this for? What am I doing? Then I'm like, okay, we got all these people who believe in you and who, you know, like can see yourself. And like, if you stay, then I think it's really, I don't know, just people can look up to me. And I think that it's not even like looked up to me as in like the sense of like, oh, like it's more of like, I can help, I could be that guide and be like, hey, like if I can do it, you can do it. Here are the resources. This is what I learned. Like make those safe spaces for people and have those conversations, I think really excites me and really informs the way that I want to do science. Because I'm like, okay, I want to make sure that whatever, if I ever have a lab, that I make sure that we're having those conversations, like make sure that we're safe, or we're going out in the field. There might be things that I don't know that make other people feel unsafe, or things that I didn't have to think about. And it's really important to have those conversations. And that's what I want to do through my science. So, yeah.
Yeah, that was wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit about your background and how that has really impacted both your personal experience, like becoming a scientist, especially holding, I think, intersectional identities and how those sort of different factors compound your experience and like your ability to navigate the world of science, like as it currently is. And I love that you sort of ended on how, like, because of these experiences, like you really do want to be a mentor and a resource and to ensure that these spaces are becoming more inclusive and more safe for people like you and also other people who come from, you know, potentially historically marginalized backgrounds. And I think it's always super exciting to be able to work with, you know, I think people within our age group where we, you know, represent the next generation of scientists and seeing how passionate people are about having these difficult conversations that I think for a really, really long time were neglected within science. So thank you so much for sharing. Hopefully somebody views this on our Instagram or our YouTube and sees you and is like, you know what, like I too want to study tree frogs, or like if Arlene can go off and do science and STEM and thrive, like I can also do it, even if there are people who are going to present barriers, et cetera. So we have one last fun bonus question, but before that, just a quick reminder to the audience that you're more than welcome to leave comments or questions in the chat. And if there are any, we'll get to those right after this super fun bonus question, which is just, what is your biggest science hot take?
I don't think this is a hot take, but I'm going to say it anyways. I think some advice that I've gotten throughout this whole internship is, or heard when thinking about my next step in like grad school, is to like work for people who care about you. And I think it's really hard in the beginning coming to like, as you're starting off early in your career, college career, I've known, it's sometimes hard to choose who you work for because you just want to take any opportunity that you can get, which is fair. And it's also kind of hard to pick and choose when you're kind of limited in what you have. But one thing that really stuck with me that I've heard in community college and for university, heard here, is to try to work with people who care about you, because it really helps your growth as a scientist, and it really helps you feel a lot better about like what you're doing instead of, being put down for things that don't really matter.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing to sort of share, because I don't think people think about it that often. Sometimes it just feels like if you want to enter academia or any other sort of rigorous career field, like you should just take like the best opportunity or the first opportunity that shows up, and then just sort of put your head down and grind and work. But I absolutely resonate with the sentiment that, you should work with people, like collaborate with people, work for people who see you as a person first, and then, as a wonderful scientist, and like anything else after that, because we're all, humans and life happens. And I think it's really important to have empathy and compassion, especially in, a discipline that can be as sort of difficult and challenging and frustrating sometimes as science. And I don't think that's like talked enough. Like, I think that's something that I also, like, I was just always shocked when professors were nice in college. I was like, oh, like nice and like invested, I think, in your like growth and your opportunity, and willing to support and back you. But like, I don't think people should be shocked by that. Like, I think that should be something that they intentionally look for and like cultivate in their relationships. So maybe not the hottest take, but I think definitely like a very warm and fuzzy take that I really appreciate. Yeah. So we actually do have a question from our chat. So from L Case, who I think is maybe our most common viewer. Hi, Lily. They're asking, how did you first get into herps?
Yeah, that is a great question. So I hope I don't remember the author. It's my bad. But I read this book called Sixth Extinction. I think that's the name of the book. And it talked about frogs and the fungus that's like the disease fungus that's killing them. And so I was like, oh no, frogs. And then I started looking for frogs at Humboldt, and I was like, where are the frogs at? And I think that's how I got involved in herps. And then there's a lot of projects with Humboldt's known for their salamanders, and trying to go and like after it rains, go in the middle of the night to go look for them. So I think that's how I got into them.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Chytrid is crazy, and I don't think it's talked nearly enough. It's like insane that this like mass extinction event has been happening for decades. But it just sort of is invisible, because like frogs and other amphibians tend to be, nocturnal. Also, they tend to be like hidden or sort of cryptically colored. But I love salamanders. I'll have to come visit you in Humboldt sometime, because they're so cute. But I'm really bad at spotting them at night. Like, I've tried to do the eye shine thing, and just everything looks like water droplets to me. So you'll have to take me out in the field and show me sometime. Yeah. So we have another question. This is from Joseph. So following up on Lily's question, do you see yourself continuing to work with herps in the future, or maybe another group, i.e. marine mammals? ?
In the future, so I don't know what I want to do in the future yet. I'm still trying to figure that out through this internship. But I could see myself working with herps. Frogs are really cool, and the more I learn about them, the more I want to continue to learn more about them. I also do love marine mammals, and a lot of my research experience is on marine mammals. So that is also another possibility. I cannot choose right now, but I could see myself doing both. So that makes the decision way harder.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I think a lot of people here in our program are sort of trying to figure out that next step, and it's really hard when you find everything about the natural world really exciting, from like frogs to marine mammals. Yeah, well, that seems to wrap up all of our questions for this live stream. But thank you so much, Arlene, for joining us today. You were an awesome host to have. Before we officially end the live stream, we want to encourage everyone to follow our social media channels on Instagram and Twitter, which are in the banner that was just posted below me, so that you can virtually join us on all of our adventures this summer. And then tune in later today at 3:35 p.m. to listen to our next series installation with Dylan. And with that, I'll let everybody go, but have a great day, everyone. Bye, Arlene.